Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Voxology podcast. Mike Erre, Tim Stafford, Nijay Gupta. Nijay, I've asked you this before. What's your middle name?
Kumar.
Yes, sir. I love
Nijay
all
Kumar
of it.
Gupta. Yeah.
There it is. There it is. If you're relatively new to the podcast, we had Nijay on. He is a phenomenal New Testament scholar, friend of Gombas. So we call that Fog. He's a Fog, friend of Gombas. And so by extension, if anyone is a friend of Gombas, they're a friend of us.
I live in the Fog.
You live in the Fog. And you're co-teaching, right, with Gombas right now?
We did. We just finished a class. It was so fun. We would kind of just have one of us present and then the other person banter. And oh my gosh, it was like a dream come true.
I love that. What was the topic?
If I could take a course from Gombas, that's good.
Yeah.
If I can take it for free, that's better.
Ooh.
If I can get paid to take a course from Gombas, that is way up there.
Top tier.
So, yeah.
Oh,
it was a New Testament survey, the letters of the New Testament and the Book of Revelation, and
Whoa.
I tell you what, he gave just a show-stopping lecture on politics and prophetic dynamics of the Book of Revelation, and we did a survey at the end of the course, and everybody loved our discussion of the Book of Revelation.
I love that. That's got to be so much
Fuller?
fun for you.
No, oh my gosh, Tim, bite your tongue.
Wasn't that where he was teaching in Fuller?
He does. He spreads around his wisdom in Northern Seminary. Yeah. Bite your tongue.
Sorry, my bad.
So I knew you were there, but you still live in the West Coast.
I live in Portland, Oregon. Yeah. So I switched institutions to Northern about 5 years ago.
Yep.
And my feet are heavily planted in the coffee drinking. Hippie snobbery of Portland, Oregon. So most of our students are distance online. I fly to Chicago for 1 week intensives a couple times a year, but we do seminary, in a way that's going to work for most people who have busy lives and can't leave their physical context. So it works. So Tim's on the East Coast. I'm on the West, but we came together for a glorious 10 weeks, and I'm the better for it.
I feel like I maybe heard that I teach at William Jessup, that maybe you were.
I was
think
just
I found
at
out like
Jessup.
a day or two after you were already there.
I was just at Jessup, yeah.
Whoa. What were you talking about?
I was talking about strange religion, but I also talked a little bit about my love book. So, spreading the love.
There it is, literally. And that's why we've gathered.
Yes.
We're not doing as many like sort of authors on book tours anymore because they're doing like 87 podcasts around the same topic. But Nijay's he's one of my favorites.
I'm special.
Tim doesn't like him. Tim Stafford doesn't like him. But I overrode him and I said, you know what? And so I saw that you had a new book on love out, which I mean, it's one of those things. It's like everyone thinks they know what it is. I want to know what love is. What's love got to do with it?
This whole podcast is
what is love? Titles. I mean, we could just.
We're gonna have a playlist. We're gonna have a playlist.
Exactly. But it's called "The Affections of Christ Jesus: Love at the Heart of Paul's Theology." And so read it and recommend it. And so what I want to do just a little bit is get into some of the core stuff because obviously the scripture begins. And the central, you cannot escape the love commands in Deuteronomy that are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so you have in covenant this sort of central invitation to a devotional response to God as sovereign. But what do you think? What was the Hebrew conception of love there? Would it and how would it differ from kind of the American conception of love?
Sure. Yeah. It's important to understand. Part of the reason I wrote this book is there's such a great misunderstanding of the whole Bible, but especially of the Old Testament. I remember walking to a mega church in Ohio. This is about 20 years ago. Mega church in Ohio. And we walked in the sermon a little bit late. And on the big screen, there's multiple screens. It said Old Testament equals law, New Testament equals grace. And it just made me so angry. I wanted to get a whip and, overturn some tables and kick some people out because it's a profound misunderstanding of the Bible. And I don't want to get all controversial, but A lot of this has to do with a history of Christian anti-Semitism and Christian anti-Judaism, the way that we try to make the New Testament the good guy by making the Old Testament the bad guy.
That's it.
That's just not the way the Bible was written. If you were to sit down with Jesus during his ministry, or even I think now, and you said, Jesus, describe the Old Testament God to me. I believe that Jesus would go to Exodus and he would read from the book of Exodus, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, full of steadfast love, abounding to the thousands generations,
slow
so
to
forth.
anger.
Yeah, slow to anger, abounding in generous love. And then if you said, what is religion? What is religion? A Jewish, a Hebraistic, a covenantal, a biblical view is Deuteronomy 6:4 and 5. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might, and so forth. When we think of the Old Testament, we shouldn't first think of law.
Yeah.
We should first think of covenantal love. So now you're asking, how is that unique within Israel? One of my favorite musicals is Hamilton the Musical. I'm a big Hamiltonian. And one of my kids' favorite songs is when the king sings, "You'll be back."
Good.
And he says,
Yes.
the King of England, he says, "I'll kill all your friends and family to show you how much I love you, to remind you of my love." And it's whimsical and it's funny, but it's also realistic to how ancient empires worked. They professed goodwill. They said, "Hey, we'll take care of you." But what they really mean is, if you don't obey, we'll kill everybody. And so love language was present in political discourse in the ancient world. So there have been some discussions about whether the Old Testament is just talking about love in sort of a political way. However, the fact that Deuteronomy is super clear that this is love of the heart as well as the body is all over the Old Testament. Circumcising your heart. And
does that mean emotions there? Because I've always heard that as sort of the seat of will or decision making.
Yeah, I think the way that Deuteronomy is trying to talk is pretty comprehensive. So, if you think about there being multiple aspects of the oneness of our being, then you have things like your mind, and you have things like your will, and you have things like your embodiment. I think Deuteronomy is trying to express all of those things. But here's what's really interesting, and I don't think most people know this, is in American culture, modern American culture, we talk about the seat of our emotions as the heart.
Yeah.
But in Hebrew and in Greek, Old and New Testament, the seat of the emotions is actually the guts, the innards. And actually, there's a Greek word, so I'm pivoting here to Greek, but there's a Greek word, and I think it's an onomatopoeia, and it's splonknidzomai.
Yes. Compassion.
Think about when you eat a little too much Dave's Hot Chicken. And what sound does your stomach make? I think it makes the sound splonknidzomai.
Yes. Oh, please.
And so,
love hurts.
So when Jesus, when the Gospels say that Jesus had compassion over, the wayward or the beleaguered people, it says literally that his bowels moved.
Yeah.
It literally says his bowels shook.
Oh, so
and
good.
In the Old Testament, it would be the same, and I don't know all the terminology there because my Hebrew's not as good as my Greek, but they would put it the guts, and we know this, like a coach who's lost 10 games in a row. Press conference, he'll say, it's time for a gut check. Yeah. Like we know, we got butterflies in the gut.
We played our guts out. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, the guts or the stomach is the seat of the emotion. However, when God calls for love, and this really gets into what my book's all about. When God calls for love, neither is he talking about merely ushy-gushy feelings that are here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nor is he talking about robotic obedience, where you just do it, but your heart's not in it.
Okay.
Now, a normal king or magistrate will only want your obedience. They mostly don't care about how you feel. But Yahweh actually wants all of it. And I think this is important because of how sin has made us crooked as humans, inside and out. So there's a process of being reformed that really has to do with our love. So I'm going to give you a little bit of Augustine here. I'm going to sneak a little Augustine in here. I love this quote. I start out the book with this.
Yeah.
Splockus am I. Yes. People are like, I don't know about this episode.
Yeah. We get that
Augustine,
every episode. It's no problem.
I guess that's your people. Okay, fair enough. Augustine says, when we ask whether someone is a good person, we're not asking what they believe or what they hope, but what they love. This is huge because Augustine is putting his flag down on this idea that you could say whatever you want, but what actually comes out of your life and your behavior and where you spend your money and where you shop and who your friends are and what your job is gets deep down into what you actually want deep down inside, what you love, what you love.
So how does that relate to worship?
Worship is love. I mean,
is that okay? Is that one way to understand it?
It is, for sure. Like, think about when Jesus says, you can't worship both God and mammon. Mammon was a god representing wealth. And he says, because you can't, as one person, you can't worship two things, because you'll love the one and hate the other, or you'll love the other and hate that one. Now, a normal Roman or Greek person would say, actually, we have 10,000 gods. So can't we? And I think what Jesus would say is what the Old Testament would say is, as humans, we are designed to fixate and to wrap ourselves around one person or one thing. This is why we value monogamy, or at least we should. This is why, and I think it's this idea, I think about Philippians chapter 2, where Paul says, look not to your own interest, but to the interests of others. What he doesn't mean is don't take care of yourself. Starve yourself and harm yourself so that other people, no, that's not what he means. But what he means is human tendency is, I got to protect me and keep everybody else away from my slice of the pie. And in fact, I need more slices of pie. And so human nature is that we want to protect and shield and guard these things that we're obsessed with. One thing I talk about in my book, this comes out of emotion theory, is this idea that deep down inside of us, there's an impulse to protect the pathway in front of us that's going to get us to security, peace, comfort, all of those things. We want to protect that pathway. And so the way I like to talk about it is our souls have tentacles. And these tentacles naturally wrap around things. So it could be our job, it could be our family, whatever it is. And those are psychologically, emotionally, the things that we love. You could say, I love giving to charity and not actually do it. You could say it and not actually do it. And that means those tentacles aren't around those things. You could say it. You could say, I love Jesus. And actually those tentacles, if we were able to get a magnifying glass and get down to the soul level, it's not there. Those tentacles aren't wrapped around that.
So is God interested in, because this is a question I think a lot of us wrestle with. If he doesn't want just blind or robotic obedience.
Right.
But I also don't love him. Is it possible to simply obey my way into affection? Or do I have to wait for the affections in order to obey? Does God count? Does God love my neighbor? Because one of the things I've actually thought is that love your neighbor doesn't mean like your neighbor. Love your neighbor means if you have the opportunity to do good, do good. If you have the opportunity to harm, don't harm. But it has nothing to do with your affections towards your neighbor. Am I wrong in that?
I think you're partially wrong in that. I think you're partially wrong in that. I think the right thing is we can be really intentional about what we wrap our tentacles around. So, for example, pray for me, guys, because I signed up to serve in the youth group at my church, because I have teenagers. I have 3 teenagers. I have an 8th grader, a 10th grader, a college student. And so I signed up for the first time in the last 20 years. I signed up to serve 10th grade boys, the small group, 10th grade boys small group in my church. And let me tell you, this group of 5, 6, 7, 8 people day one, I started in August, 6, 7, 8 months ago. I started August, and day one, I don't love them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even like them.
Yeah.
I don't love them. I don't like them. Day one. So then the question is, okay, I can love them by showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them. I don't like them. I can love them by showing up. But eventually they're going to know that I don't like them or I don't know them, because when we like somebody, there's certain things that happen, attentiveness. And when you're faking love, people know. You could do any one thing out of sheer obedience. I'm going to show up to this event and make sure kids don't smoke pot or whatever. Like, I could any one thing you can do. But my goal isn't just to show up for them. My goal is to show up and care for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can actually care for them without cultivating that care.
Mm-hmm.
Without cultivating that care. So then the question is, how do you so I think emotion theory, we haven't talked a lot about this, but I do a lot with emotion theory in the book. And there's this idea, I think part of emotion theory, which is understanding how our emotions relate to our thinking and our behavior. Okay. Part of that is you're not going to be all in on something unless you develop an attachment to it.
Yeah.
If you just say like, I'm going to love my church, but I'm not going to like them, and I'm just going to show up and serve coffee. Like, okay, but then I got sick and I couldn't make it, or then I, went on vacation, I couldn't make it. Like eventually the disintegration of your life is going to come out somehow. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think part of the question you're asking is, well, partly you're asking, do I actually have to like them? Mm-hmm. And what I would answer from the Bible and from emotion theory is, if you don't eventually come to like them, it's going to jeopardize your ability to actually be committed. Mm-hmm. It's going to jeopardize that. So then I would say the pathway that most of us have to liking somebody is actually getting to know them.
Yeah, proximity.
The more you get to know them. Now, obviously, there's some people, and I can think of people where I'm like, I'm never going to like this person.
Yeah.
We're just friction. It's not. But for most people, think about all these movies we love, these superhero movies that humanize the villain.
Yeah.
That humanize the Gore the God Butcher. Think about when you get inside, you get inside the villain, like those Thanos. TikToks that talk about like a villain was made that day, or, that all that stuff. Like the pathway to liking, and I would say this is also love. The pathway to love is actually empathy. Empathy.
Hold on, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. How sinful it is in a second. But I want to just keep pushing on this, because love of enemy.
Yeah.
So, because I guess I'm stuck on my feeling toward my enemy has very little to do with whether or not I act lovingly towards them. If I'm acting for their benefit, even at great cost for myself, that to me feels loving, even if it's going against how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
But what I think I'm hearing you say is, no, the feeling needs to come for that to be a legitimate act. And I'm like, I don't know that the feeling will ever come.
I agree with you. I agree with you that in an individual instance, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I could be mad at my kids and still show up to their, choir concert. Like that's fine. But in terms of how it forms my attitude over time to that person, you can't live with this contradiction of hating the person and trying to love them. You actually, that's just not how humans work.
Sure.
And so any one instance, of course you could say, I'm going to show up for this. I have relatives where I don't get along with them. And, totally. It's tough. Like, it's really tough, but if they needed me, I would be there for them.
Yeah.
If they really needed me,
regardless
I'd be there for them.
Of how you felt.
Yeah. But I do want to cultivate, I would feel like God's wanting me to cultivate compassion for them. And compassion by nature, the term compassion by nature is a feeling. Is a feeling. The term, in Greek.
So his bowels moving
is a feeling.
A feeling.
That's a feeling. You feel it. It makes sounds.
So
it makes sense.
If you were to say, okay, so love is the cultivation of attachment or interest or devotion.
Yeah.
That includes every part of us. That's the heart, soul, mind, and
strength.
Is that a fair definition of what you would say love turns out to be?
Yes, but I will say it doesn't manifest in the same forms. So let's say I have an abusive spouse, which I don't, by the way. She's amazing. But let's say I had an abusive spouse.
Yep.
Let's say she's going to get phone calls. Let's say I have an abusive spouse, right? And I have to separate. I have to separate from this person for my sake or for my children, all of that. Mm-hmm. What does loving them look like? What does the Christian duty of love, the Christian command of love look like for that person? It's not going to look like staying with them and continue to be abused and all that. But there is an aspect that God is calling us to care for that person. Now, I'm not trying to be glib. So for those of you listening, I'm not saying get rid of those feelings or whatever. This could happen over decades. This can happen but it's really an orientation of our being towards a person. So where I get this from, you're wondering, Nijay, are you making this stuff or where I get this from? Think about when God says, when Jesus commands, people think it. When Jesus says, love your enemies, right? What does he say? He says, God sends the rain
on the just
and the sunshine on the righteous and unrighteous alike. So think about, Mike and Tim, if God gave you administrative access over the sun and the rain. Okay?
Yep.
And you notice there's a group of people who are deep, deep in sin, committing genocide. Would you turn off the sun for them? Would you turn off the rain for them? I would be tempted. I would do that. So we can't take that lightly. We can't take it lightly. When God says a creature as a created being deserves to be cared for. Now, the question then is, in any given situation, how that person should be cared for. And it's not shake hands, kiss and make up, put on a happy face. Absolutely not. If my kid said, hey, I want to try drugs, can I do that? Right. We would just say, no, that's dumb. Stop saying that, pinhead. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't say it to him, but I would say, that's not good for you. I love you, and that's not good for you. So whenever I talk about this book, I feel like in the back of people's minds is, are we enabling bad behavior? Are we enabling bad behavior by doing this? And I would say, look at what God risked to come into this world as a human, be killed by us. Was that enabling bad behavior? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that was Jesus's compassion to sinners, his table fellowship with sinners.
All of it. Yeah.
I mean, all of it could
be risky.
Perceived that way. It is.
It's risky.
So for just this first part, just to, in layman's terms, is part of the equation that loving without liking is not sustainable for a human being over a long period of time. It may be in certain instances on a one-off occasion with an enemy or something like that, but by and large, it's not sustainable for a human to just try to love without growing compassion or empathy for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And I think we have to understand love is a many, many complex and multifaceted thing. I struggled to not define love in the book because anytime you try to get a grasp on it, it's going to kind of wriggle away from you. But when even when Deuteronomy says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, God is continually telling Israel, your lips are saying the right things, but your heart is far from me. And God will not tolerate cold obedience. It's not. And the question is why? It's because we're relational beings. God is a relational being. Humans are relational beings, but I think it is this wider picture, Tim, of I ended up giving some lectures on this where, do you guys know where love as a verb started as a saying?
No.
Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, people had said it before, but he really popularized it. So this is the early 90s. And then DC Talk just took it to a whole nother level. Love as a verb. But Stephen Covey, he had these 7 habits. My dad was really into this. And that the first habit was be proactive. And there's a little anecdote in this chapter that says, Covey was talking to a man and he's saying, I'm having marital struggles with my wife. And he just said, forget all the feelings and just love her actively.
Yes.
And
the feelings will come. And the feelings will come.
He didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
he didn't say that. He didn't say that. And I would say I would say that's fine, but I would say my wife is a marriage therapist and an expert in psychology, and I think she would say we can do the motions and not really have a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really dangerous. So I think, again, we have to act in good faith by doing the right things, but just doing them isn't love. Doing them, and so mechanics, what we're talking about sometimes is mechanics. Mechanics isn't the solution. Mechanics don't save a marriage.
Right.
There's often deeper things they need to actually talk out, that sort of thing. So I think Covey, even though I understand the anecdote and it's fine, but I think that can lead to an unhealthy relationship because you're just saying, oh, get the person flowers, but you still have this resentment that you're harboring, and you have these old fights you're remembering, and So then the question is that cold love really love in a relationship? And yeah, it's complex, isn't it? But
it is.
I mean, if you see a stranger stranded on the side of the road, you don't know them, but if you go and help them and call for help them get towed, jump their car, whatever, like that's obedience without all the feelings. But actually stopping is the feelings, isn't it? I mean, that sense of like, this is somebody's kid, this is someone's mother or father.
Yeah.
I think those feelings.
Yeah. It is very complex. I think over time we've turned it into such a two-dimensional idea. But, if you're approaching an enemy versus your abusive wife versus the person on the side of the road or whatever, like the nuance of how to approach each of those things or what it's going to ask of you or whatever varies so much. But we do tend to offer such two-dimensional views of these things. They're just like, just do it this way. The end.
Well, think about how much of love of neighbor is construed as saying hard truth to people.
Yeah.
So I'm going to speak truth in love from Ephesians, and Gombas has done a great job of saying, no, it's actually truthing in love. But a lot of people look at that verse and say, hey, my job in loving my neighbor is just to tell the truth to them,
just to call it all out.
I just have to call out sin, or I have to, whatever. And what would you say? Is that what we're getting at? Is that loving our neighbors?
Yeah. I mean, often what we're doing when we're doing that is there's a, because I know this from personal experience, there's a deeper part of us that's actually saying, screw you. That when we're saying, we think the loving part is just saying what the Bible says or what our theology says.
That's it.
The loving part is, hey, Mike, you robbed that bank. You shouldn't have done that. Give the money back. You're a damn dirty sinner. Like that. That we think that's the love part is, Mike, you did this bad thing. I want to help you make it right. Let's get together. Let's connect. Let's talk. Because in the end, I want to see great things happen in your life. I want to see great things happen. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to work towards a pathway for you to get from here to there. The love part is how you want to see that person's life turn for the good, and whether you're willing to put any skin in the game. This is why social media is kind of a disaster, because we could talk to so many people that we'll have no connectivity to. Now, do I think there's a place for public discourse? Yes, but in the past, we've had trained professionals, hopefully, who have experience and education and, writing op-ed pieces and back and forth and all of that. Not just everybody, with a Wi-Fi code calling everybody out on the internet.
Yeah.
So I think there are one or two people for every 100 whose job it is to call out people publicly. And I think for the other 98 people, you need to really focus on the love part. The truthing. And what is truthing? I mean, if I want to connect the word truth to righteousness, it's helping to turn the world directly around you, your neighbors, your workplace, where you shop, your family, towards the way of God.
Yep.
Right? In love, you want to direct all of that, and that's not bumper stickers, right? That's not a sassy bumper sticker. That's not, that's not the take 'em down tweet of the day. That's like, I see this thing happening. I'm really concerned about it. It's not the way of God. And if I'm going to call you out on it, I want to be committed to some journey. It could be in prayer. of praying for you, praying for good things. Let me put it this way, Mike and Tim. What if for every mean tweet trying to truth someone, we had to commit to praying God's blessings, neutral blessings, rain and sun blessings, not if they repent, not if they whatever, but God's rain and sun blessing on them for a year, every day, saying, I hope this person has a good day. I hope people say nice things to them. I hope they find the love of their life. I hope. I think that would change the equation. I
think that's a really great idea, because the social media is such a great example. Like, my students are all 19, 20, 21 in that range. They are the generation that grew up, maybe the first one that grew up with it in their hand from day one, whereas the rest of us kind of acquiesce at some point. But the ability, as we always have these conversations about the negative aspects of social media, but the fact that it's not going anywhere. So how do you learn how to navigate it in a healthy way or whatever? But these kind of things you're talking about, it's developing these new muscles that enable you to be flexible, to adapt to. So that idea on Twitter, I think, is a really great idea, because if you did that for a year over someone that just, drives you up the wall, it may develop a really new muscle in you that enables you to approach people in a different way going forward in those. So I like that.
Yeah. Caitlin Beatty, I'm sure you guys have connected with her before. She has this book, Celebrities for Jesus. Oh my gosh. Every seminary student every pastor needs to read this. One of the things she says about celebrities, which is a particular category to her, is they have power without proximity. Yeah. Meaning they're able to isolate themselves from real relationships. Yeah. And I've actually seen this. I've seen this in real time with people with great notoriety, with lots of followers, with a huge amount of leverage, influence. And if they isolate themselves from real friendships, real relationships, people that can call them out on things, then you can't actually do the love part. So I guess what I'm getting back to, guys, is when it says truthing in love, I think, to me, when Paul says that, he's assuming it's in the context of relationship. A relationship that can be ongoing. Now, when Paul calls Felix or Caesar out or whoever, can you do that in love? I don't think that's what he means in Ephesians, because he's talking about a church. Yeah, no, he's talking about a church with relationships. I think there are vocations that we have where we do public discourse. I think that's fine. I think that's good. The prophets did that and Jesus did that. But I think for the hoi polloi, regular folk like us,
good use of polloi.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a Christian band from the 90s too.
All right, I've got to jump in. I've got like 77 more questions. 77s, there's another band for you.
It's important stuff. Yeah.
It really is. So quickly, so we're talking a lot about our love for people and our love for God. Before we get to God's love for us, which is a massive part of the book, how do we understand, how does that understanding of love relate to two uncomfortable characteristics of God in the Hebrew scriptures? One is his jealousy. Yeah. And then the other is I had it, his jealousy. Oh, and the fear of the Lord. How does love relate to those two?
It's great. It's all wrapped up together. And this is beautiful.
I would guess.
So let's start with jealousy. God is a jealous God. I'm on the translation committee for New Living Translation.
Yes, you are.
This just came up in our committee a couple weekends ago, and we were talking about how to translate that language in Hebrew and Greek into English, because it's one word that has two kind of different but similar nuances. Yeah. It can mean jealousy, or it can mean zealousy.
Yeah.
Zeal or Geel, if you will. And so we actually batted it back and forth. I actually don't remember what we decided, but we batted it back and forth. Should we say God is a zealous God, or God is a jealous God? And we had a long discussion about this. It's really important, and it comes up in the New Testament as well. And I think the reality is it's hard to choose between the two, because his zealousy, his zealousness, his zealosity, his zesty is the wrong word for it, but his zeal is is because love is meant to be exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Love is meant to be exclusive. So I'm one of these guys. I'm married. I'm one of these guys. I don't like my wife is hanging out with any guy of any kind.
Yeah.
And she's always like, hey, me and so went out for lunch. And I'm just like, no, you know. And we have this ongoing joke whenever she brings up one of her old boyfriends or one of the kids bring it up. I'm like, oh, that guy. Like, and the joke is like, okay, you got this woman. Like, you've been married for 20 years to this woman. Why are you upset about the guy she dated in college? But it's that feeling that we get that this person might be wooed towards someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So for God to be jealous, we have to differentiate between the negative aspects of that term for us and the positive aspects.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't want my wife to go out on a date with another guy and I'm jealous, there's nothing sinful about that, even though there's a whole bunch of vice lists in the Bible that say jealousy is a sin. It's a sin because most of the time when we experience those feelings, we kind of get into, Incredible Hulk mode and we start smashing things because we're so mad and we're letting these feelings get away from us. So if my wife came back from having lunch very innocently with a work colleague and I just start laying into her and I just start yelling at her, that's rage. And God doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a kind of healthy and holy jealousy or Geo, if you will, where it's well within God's rights as a covenantal lover, as a covenantal partner to say, hey, you're going after the Baals and the Ashtoreths, and that just ain't right.
Yeah.
And so God is a jealous God. That should be a good thing to us. Because God has said, in this covenant, I've made myself available to you 100% every minute of every day for the rest of your life and beyond.
Yeah.
And we're the ones saying that we're not available to God.
Right. I've talked about before, if one of my kids started calling someone else father or daddy, there would be something that would rise up that isn't bad, that would say, hey, that's not proper. No one's going to love you the way I'm going to love you. I've always understood it that way. And that totally makes sense with your definition of love. Fear of the Lord, man, I've heard that defined so many different ways. How does that jive with affection or tentacling?
Yeah. It's the type of relationship. You guys will probably roll your eyes, but I'll often say to my kids when we're arguing and they're like, what about what I want? And I'll be like, this is not a democratic relationship. I'll often say to them, this is not a democracy. You don't get a vote. So if we're like, you have to do this or you have to do that or this chore or that chore, and that sort of thing. And they hate when I say that. I'll be like, we don't have an equal relationship. Like, I love you and you love me, but this is not an equal relationship.
So it's respect for the difference in status or power or intelligence or whatever.
About 15 years ago, I was teaching a course and I talked about how we're called to be submissive to God. And the student, I think innocently, but she said, but isn't God kind of also submissive to us? And I was like, no, he's not. Now, I think what she's trying to say is, isn't he gracious? Isn't he humble? Isn't he, I would use the word deferential, meaning when my kid comes home from school, I've had a full day of stuff. They've had a full day of stuff. But I'm usually the one to say, how was your day? And they don't say to me, Daddy, what did you do today? What are your highs and lows? Like, they don't say that to me. Yeah. So I'm being deferential, even though on paper, I'm the more important person because I make money. And
that's kenotic, right? I mean, that's you're almost descending.
Yeah. So it's deferential. So fear, I think, is this idea, like, we don't go to God and say, hey, I got some important work to do in business, so I'm not going to be able to do this prayer thing for a while, but I'll come back to it later when I get a chance. God's like, nope, that's not the way it works. That's not how this relationship works. It's this kind of, we can treat each other. Like, I'll say to my kids sometimes, like when they're talking back, I'll say, you could talk to your friends that way, which they can't, but you could talk to your friends that way, but you can't talk to me that way. And I think God is doing that when he calls for fear. It's understanding the nature of that relationship.
Right.
Like, understanding the dynamic. I think the parental metaphor is a really healthy one. Like, with my kids, I want to be the fun dad. I for sure want to be the fun dad.
Yeah.
Like, I want to take them to Chipotle. I want to take them out to ice cream. I want to go out to the movies with them. my daughter and I are really into singing at the piano, singing songs on the radio. My son and I are into video games and, sports, watching soccer or playing FIFA or whatever. But you if you have kids, you realize there's a line that you can cross every now and again where the relationship's too familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they say something or they do something, you're like, whoa, let's back up. And remember what relationship we have. And I think that's the fear. So we have to differentiate. I often get this question when we're talking about love and fear.
Sure.
Why does the Old Testament say fear the Lord and the New Testament says perfect love drives out fear? What I would say is they're talking about different connotations of fear. One connotation of fear is absolute horror and terror where you don't want to be around the person.
Yeah.
And the other kind of fear is the kind where like a sense of awe, like when you go to the Grand Canyon and you step close to the edge, you're just looking out, like your heart starts beating fast.
Yeah.
And you start sweating and you're not afraid you're going to die because you're not stupid, but it's just the grandiosity of what you're seeing and experiencing. Like it's too much. It's overwhelming, but you don't want to leave. You came here for this. You came here for that feeling. You came here for that feeling of like, woo, like that's like, it's kind of like roller coaster. Like when you're on a roller coaster, I hate roller coasters, by the way, but when you're on a roller coaster, I love them. Cedar Point, love you, Cedar Point, if you're listening.
Yeah.
But I love roller coasters, but like my wife gets in the thrill of it. I don't. Like I think I'm gonna die. But let's say it's my wife. She wants the thrill of that. But what's happening when you're experiencing that on a roller coaster? What's happening is your body's saying you're gonna die. But your mind is like, I kind of know I'm not gonna die because like a million people do this and only one person dies every like 5 years and they get a lawsuit. But I think that's that way with the fear of the Lord is like, I have a reading desk at the Bible Project headquarters in Portland. This is a little bit of a personal brag here. They gave me a little flex. They gave me a reading desk there. I literally just come in and I read and then I leave. I don't do anything. But
the Nijay reading nook, yes.
Yeah, the little reading nook. So I was there a few Mondays ago, and my wife. I was out of town before that at Jessup, and my wife had said she went to hear N.T. Wright speak. And I missed it. He was speaking at a church.
Holy
I missed
Spirit.
it.
Yeah.
I was gone. Yeah. Holy Spirit conference. Yeah. I missed it. And so the weekend was over and I go into work on Monday and I'm just sitting there and N.T. Wright walks by at the Bible Project. And I'm just like, oh, like, it's like, that's the closest to like an angelic encounter I'm going to get probably. But like, I think the fear there is like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to, you know what I mean? But like, he's a nice guy and he's a caring and thoughtful person. And so it's nothing against him, but I'm like fumbling my words and, will you please read my book? I think that kind of fear is more of the Old Testament kind of fear of like, this is a giant. Like this is grandiose. It's like thunderstorms. I love thunderstorms and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. There was a windstorm here in Portland, like 60-mile-an-hour winds. It literally knocked a massive tree down, like a tree the size of three houses stacked on top of each other. Massive wind, and we were kind of scared. We didn't flee, but it was just such a grand experience. That's more of what the Old Testament is talking about. Is when God's in the room, like this is going to shake the room. Yeah. But then the New Testament is sometimes, not always, is talking about fear where we're like, I want to get away from it. And that's not the kind of fear that is compatible with love. And so when we love God, the fearful God, the fear-inducing God, we're saying, I want to get closer to this dangerous phenomenon.
Yeah.
I want to do it in the right way.
Get closer to the Grand Canyon. I want to push into the sequoias. I want to,
But I'm not going to dive in.
Right. Yeah. It's a healthy respect. Yeah. For sure. I love that. You talked about compassion and empathy as kind of the way that we tentacle to people that we don't have natural affections to. And obviously there's stuff coming out, and there has been over the last couple of years about, Elon was on Joe Rogan talking about how empathy is a really destructive emotion. We now have, and I use theologians in quotes. I mean, I have no idea, but talking about the sin of empathy. Yeah. Are you familiar with any of that argumentation?
I am. Yes.
Okay. Can we talk just a little bit about
that? Yes, toxic
empathy,
all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do they mean there? Are they setting up a straw man? Do they mean the
Yeah.
same thing that we mean by empathy? Like,
I think the problem they're feeling, which is ironic because it's a feeling. The problem they're feeling is real, but what they're targeting is wrong.
okay.
Something happening in the world that is troubling is real, I think.
Okay, what is
but
that?
but so what I think it is a failure to recognize the exact right pathway for healthy change.
Okay.
And they're targeting empathy as the problem.
Okay.
But empathy actually isn't the problem. So let's talk about what empathy actually is. Because empathy is a biblical concept.
Yeah.
Also. So empathy, if you think about just the English word, so the path part comes from Greek pathos. So I can give you a little Greek lesson. Comes from pathos, which means to suffer. To suffer. And then the N part, M part is actually from the Greek preposition en, which means in or with. So empathy is to suffer with somebody. Is to suffer with somebody. So I'm going to give you my favorite example of this.
Do it. Do it.
One of my favorite YouTube things to watch when I'm having breakfast is Hot Ones.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I love watching. Why do we love watching Hot Ones? Why? Why do we love?
Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite guest? Just real quick. Do you have a favorite that you go back to?
I love the people. But I love the people that struggle. Because I would struggle. I love the people. So I love like the Deadpool guys. So this is Ryan Reynolds and
speaking of listening to your guts.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I think we watch it both because it's like watching a car crash. You can't turn away. But then also like compassion, like that would be so hard for me. It's so funny if you think 30 years ago to tell somebody there's going to be this show that everybody watches where people just suffer.
Yeah.
Your favorite celebrities suffer. That's empathy because you're entering into someone else's suffering. That's different than sympathy. Sympathy is the idea of like, I've never been sick. You're sick. I feel bad for you. Empathy is like, I want to enter into it with you. And we could do that from a distance, but we do it psychologically. So there's never anything wrong with empathy because it is essential to humanity. Think about the Holocaust. Think about apartheid. Think about the pandemic. I mean, think about Dolly Parton giving money for vaccine research. Think about so the world wouldn't still exist without empathy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is people saying, I'm going to give and serve for another person's tribe because I can feel what they're feeling with a shared sense of humanity. When they talk about toxic empathy, I think the background notion is it's a kind of a certain set of like domino assumptions. So assumption number one, if I care too much about somebody, then I'm going to overlook some wrong or some injustice, and then I'm going to buy into whatever's wrong, and then I'm going to perpetuate wrong. Right? And so they try to link the problem back from accepting wrongdoing back to the source, and the source is empathy. What I would say is empathy is always good. It's always good. There's never a situation where empathy is bad. Where it ends up going off track is what we do with the empathy, what we actually do with the empathy. So, for example, when I was young, when I was a teenager, I had my parents wrapped around my pinky. I mean, I'm the youngest of three. I'm a mama's boy. I'm good look. I'm just ruggedly good looking.
Yeah.
I had hair back then. And so like I got out of every chore. I mean, every chore. I didn't have to do any. My kids, anytime I make them do chores, they're like, Dad, you didn't do any chores. Like my dad, we had a riding lawnmower because we had a big lawn. And my dad once told me, hey, go mow the lawn. I didn't want to. So my brother was like, if you don't want to, then run over the curb and break the blade. with the lawnmower, and I did. 15-year-old me had a really crafty plan. I never mowed the lawn a day after that. Never mowed the lawn. Never made my bed. Never did my laundry. And my because I was able to make up a sob story, and my parents would feel bad for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I think what happened was toxic, but it's not the empathy that's toxic. The empathy is not toxic. What's toxic is not having a longer term vision for what would be good for our life, because fast forward 20, 30 years, and I wish I had done chores. I would have learned a lot about good habits and being thoughtful about other people being in your house and picking up after yourself and all this stuff. My parents didn't make me exercise. They were like, school, school, school. And lo and behold, I struggle with exercising now. So with our kids, they got to exercise every day. They got to eat healthy, all of that. So empathy is actually not the problem. Empathy is the solution to our problems in the world. The problem is how we actually work out. If we make empathy the problem, then inevitably we distance people and we push them out of humanity. What we end up doing is we say, I'm a real human and you're not. If we don't use empathy, which is our greatest superpower, we actually say, I'm human and you're not. So, okay, I don't know if you guys are Severance people.
Oh,
are you guys
dude,
Severance people?
Last night, yes.
Let's talk. Don't tell me I didn't see it. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna miss Irving. He died.
Oh no. Okay, yeah. Shh.
I'm just
Don't
kidding.
spoil it for people. Okay.
I'm not. No, I'm not.
So, well, it depends on what you mean by die. Okay, you're going too far. All right. So I was hanging out with a scholar friend at a conference recently, and
Flex.
we were sitting down. Talking about severance, and he said, "What do you think it's actually about?" Like, I think he meant not the plot, but the deeper meaning of it. And you know what I said? I think it's about slavery. Right? I think it's actually about slavery. Because they're pulling themes directly out of ancient world slavery, modern world slavery, dehumanization. When they're talking about the innies and the outies, they're talking about the innies as slaves, and they're talking about the outies as slaveholders.
Yeah.
I mean, if you took out the word innie and outie, if you took out the words innie, outie, and you put master and slave, it would fit seamlessly. Yeah. And the trick, I think the trick of the show for me is how they can successfully maximize the work of the people, the innies, by dehumanizing them. And I think if you go back and rewatch the episodes we've already seen, I'm very curious to see the theme of lack of empathy. Lack of empathy. And lack of empathy comes from especially lack of knowledge. If you don't, let me give you this example. This will blow your mind. In the Roman world, there were two main types of slaves. There were state-owned slaves and privately owned slaves. And then amongst privately owned slaves, there were two types of slaves. There were household slaves and non-household slaves. Household slaves worked in the house close by the masters, like cooks and hairdressers and cleaners and gardeners and all that. Non-household slaves might work on a plantation far, far away. And this is crazy. Think about this. Most household slaves eventually get freed because they're around the masters and they're humanized by the masters. They form relationship. Yeah. And the ones that are out working the plantations, if you want to punish your household slave, you might sell them, but if they were a productive slave, you would send them out to work somewhere else on one of your businesses and never see them, and therefore they would never get freed. So think about the relationship there between humanness and empathy. And empathy requires proximity.
Yep. Oh, it's so good. So good. And so, it's just easier.
Severance, man.
Oh, it's so good. We're gonna have to put a little warning on this one, Tim.
Or to say
Just
we're
to
gonna have
say.
to do like I want to do a whole another episode just
Let's
on
do
this.
a whole other episode. I love it.
Oh, we
Everything is about the Greco-Roman world. I think that
Yeah.
it'll come back. Everything is about it.
All right, Nijay, we're gonna wrap this. It's been an hour, which is flown by, dude.
It goes
You're
by so fast.
freaking amazing. Where can people find you online?
Yes. So I have a podcast of my own. It's called Slow
Yes, you do.
Theology with Dr. AJ Swoboda.
Yeah, waiting
And
for that invite. Waiting.
We
for
don't do
that.
guests, Mike. You know,
Okay.
we've only had one guest ever. It was NT Wright, and his publicist asked if he could be at our show. We're like, we're not going to turn down NT Wright.
Never.
But
Never.
But we're just two people talking about the tough things of faith and life. And so check out Slow Theology. And then the other is I have a Substack called Engaging Scripture, where I talk about everything related to the Bible. So check that out. Book reviews, giveaways, fun stuff. Check it out.
And the book's out. Speaking of book reviews, the love book is out.
It is The Affections of Christ Jesus, Love of the Heart, Paul's Theology. Anywhere books are sold, check it out. We didn't get into a lot of the biblical texts because I've done that on a lot of other podcasts, but I hope that folks will.
There's some good Bible.
Learn more about how Scripture is focused on this subject in ways they didn't think about before.
Yep. No, it's really great that way. Absolutely. And just because he's got proximity to me because I'm looking at his face. His other books are incredible too.
Thank you.
Take that. All right, my friend, take care of yourself. We're going to wrap it up. Seth Erre, come here. All right. Have you met my son, Seth? DJ?
No, I haven't.
You may have.
I haven't.
Okay, so Seth.
Maybe.
Seth is, he's the greatest.
Hello.
Ohio State.
How's it going?
Yes.
Do you want to close with Shema, bro?
Yes, just do it.
Okay, let's do Shema. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, DJ, you get to witness this.
Yeah,
he closes our
let's
church
go.
service this way.
Yeah.
So this is how we do it. All right, ready?
Shema Israel,
Adonai,
Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Hear Israel,
the
Lord God,
the Lord
with the
alone.
word, and love you, God, with a heart, soul, mind, and strength.
We go
In the
Jesus'
name
version.
of self. Amen.
Amen. Dude, you're such a stud.
You got the
Thank you,
Hebrew
bro.
I love
too.
you,
Very
Jay.
impressive.
I love you, DJ.
Love you too. Very impressive. If I could get my students to memorize that, all would be well.
Oh, yeah, he's a rock star. Anyway, DJ, thanks for your time, bro. We love you. We
Good
appreciate
chatting with you guys.
Take care of yourself.
Thank
Don't
you.
go. We're just cutting the podcast off
Of course.
now.